Hello, thanks for joining us. Coming up on today's film show, a pitch-perfect performance from Florence Foster Jenkins. There's love in a cold climate in Arctic Heart, and we laugh along with the French classic La Grande Vadrouille.
She's remarkable, isn't she?
She can't be a little flat.
Flat?
For two, I'm two for tea.
And you and me and you.
Well, I'm joined by Lisa Nesselson, our film critic. Hi, Lisa.
Hello, Olivia.
We're starting with a film being released in France today. It's called Florence Foster Jenkins. It's about a real-life socialite and music lover. Does this lady deserve an entire film?
Well, when Meryl Streep plays her, the obvious answer is yes, of course it is. This is a lovely motion picture about the power of art blended with utter, complete, bottomless obliviousness. Florence Foster Jenkins absolutely adored music, particularly opera, which she proudly performed for select fellow enthusiasts. She was kind and generous and incredibly enthusiastic, and more than a little eccentric, she was also utterly tone deaf. On the internet, you can easily find and listen to recordings of the real woman singing arias from the classical repertoire, and I have to say the words god-awful and ear-splittingly bad don't even begin to describe the sound. Let's hear from two perfectly matched co-stars denigrating each other's performances.
She's remarkable, isn't she?
Every single take she did was completely different to the one before. She never tries to think, she never thinks, well, I didn't quite get that, I'll do it again the same way, but better. It's always reinvented each time with a whole new idea.
She's a person who has retained something that we all have when we're children. When you're a kid and you can't really do anything that well, nevertheless, you hurl yourself into the imagining of it, and you take delight in just the doing. It's the purest meaning of the word amateur.
She never met a note she could not mangle. She had absolutely no range, but because she's wealthy and she's essentially kind, nobody has ever dared point out these glaring flaws to the woman herself. Her loving husband, with the wonderful name of St. Clair Bayfield, is sweetly played by Hugh Grant, who micromanages their posh existence so that Florence can go on living in her very pleasant bubble. And when Florence gets it into her head that she wants to give a performance in New York's Carnegie Hall, it seems that the screeching cat will be let out of the bag. Let's take a look.
I'm so nervous, Whitey.
Oh, don't be.
Are you nervous, Mr. McMullen?
Somewhat.
You have a full and very warm house, and you are both going to be sensational. Ready?
Yes.
Break a leg. House lights, please.
This is what we live for, isn't it? This moment.
Now, this film is directed by Stephen Frears, the British director. It's in English, but Florence Foster Jenkins' story also inspired Xavier Giannoli, the French writer and director. His take on the story was Marguerite. How does it compare?
Well, you know, Marguerite was probably my favorite French film of 2015, and personally, I thought it should have represented France instead of the Turkish language film Mustang for the foreign language Oscars. Catherine Fro, who you hear there, won the Best Actress César for her incredibly wonderful performance as Marguerite, a wealthy French socialite who lives for music and sings so atrociously it's transcendently bad, and nobody tells her, so she doesn't suspect. Florence Foster Jenkins is set in 1943, 1944. Giannoli had the terrific idea to set his film in 1920, 1921, so the costumes and the cars are fab, the Dada movement is underway, the cinema and recorded sound are relatively new. He plays with all of that. She has an impressive butler who protects her from bad notices by cutting them out of the newspapers. She has a foppish, incredibly entertaining voice instructor who's supposed to get her into shape for a public concert. I have to say, I like both versions of this story very much, but I think Marguerite is the better film. Both films, ironically, permit us to take pleasure in excellence, because even though they're about a flagrant absence of talent, they are very well cast, beautifully performed, just plain well made. And as an added bonus, if you're here in France, the film is out this week, but Florence Foster Jenkins has already played in Britain, but it's not out in the US until August 12th.
A very charismatic lady there who inspired two directors. And you can catch our interview with Stephen Frears on the France 24 website, talking about Florence Foster Jenkins and other things. Now, we're moving from a world in which money is no object to one in which money is very difficult to come by. A French film that mixes penguins, sex and medical research. That's an unusual combination. Arctic Heart, tell us more.
Well, I have confidence in my own opinion, but sometimes I feel it's better to get some outside information. So I'd just like to ask you, good movie? Worth seeing? That's what I thought. This is an ambitious first film, and it's quite entertaining in an offbeat, low-budget way. It is about the transformative power of love, and I think it's very, very original. The French title is Le Secret des Banquises, Arctic Heart, written and directed by Marie Madinier. Guillaume Canet plays Professor Quignard, the head of a French lab attempting to hit on the secret to immunity from illness for humans, based on the fact that, think about it, penguins never catch cold. So Quignard has extracted the protein that keeps penguins healthy under ridiculously adverse conditions. Charlotte Le Bon plays Christophine, an eternal grad student who works in the lab, and she's had a long-time crush on the boss. He has no idea she exists. When it's announced that American scientists working on this very same subject are about to start human trials, the French scientists have 3 weeks to come up with results, and so Christophine, yes, impulsively takes an unorthodox approach. We've got penguins, mice, sex, not the standard romantic comedy.
Well, that's the intrigue, the story, but what about the science part? What is this penguin protein?
Well, I assumed this was completely made up, but in fact the serum that's called ppm in the film actually does exist, and it functions as a sort of built-in antibiotic. Its real name is sphenoxine, in French anyway, and scientists hope to use it in treating cystic fibrosis. So the scientific underpinnings are plausible, but this is a whimsical, bittersweet romance. It's a comedy. It's told with lots of deadpan humor and visual flair. There's a gung-ho supporting cast. Let's take a look.
Now, as a French film, there is perhaps this unfair stereotype that there has to be sex in it. Is that a major part?
That stereotype is completely legitimate in the case of this film. It has an incredibly acrobatic sex scene that I really enjoy, and they even brought in acrobats to advise them on it.
Right. OK, we're going from a very cold climate to hopefully a warmer one, if the weather holds up this summer here in Paris. Parisians will be able to watch 5 movies a week under the stars, the Ciné en plein air. It's a hugely popular event every summer. Tell us more.
Well, to re-employ the word huge, I'm a huge fan of huge screens, and this is a terrific way to see a movie at La Villette in the 19th arrondissement of Paris, over on the eastern side of the city. It stays light pretty late here in summer, so you're welcome to have a picnic supper on the grass and then watch a movie on this giant inflatable screen. The movies are carefully chosen. It's a nice communal atmosphere. The sound and the projection have greatly improved since the city started doing this 26 years ago. Admission is free, but they'll rent you a rather comfortable reclining cloth chair for a small fee. 30 free movies is nothing to scoff at. And the selection this year, there's really only 1 or 2, I'd say, aren't terrifically worth going to see. The theme for this year's lineup is dress code. So that has to do with the costumes and uniforms. Paul Verhoeven's Starship Troopers is a highlight, as is Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket, the 1966 Batman movie, if you've never seen it, Tim Burton's Corpse Bride. But there are also really movies for grown-ups. There's things in black and white. There's things in foreign languages. Fabulous opportunity.
It's a great event, yeah, and it's worth getting there early because it gets very busy. Now, we're finishing off with a French classic from 1966, which held the record for ticket sales. I didn't know this until the film Titanic came along. La Grande Vadrouille Vadrouille. It's a comedy set during the German occupation. Lisa, is it that funny?
Comedy set during the German occupation doesn't sound funny, but French people love this movie to pieces. I personally had never seen it. I just went to see it with the French audience, and I have to say, people were doubled over with laughter at things that I'm not going to say completely escaped me, but I just didn't think they were riotously entertaining. But it's not hard to imagine that just a little over 20 years after the end of World War II, French audiences got an enormous kick out of 3 downed British pilots and 2 Frenchmen outsmarting a bunch of comic book Germans as they're trying to get into the unoccupied zone via slapstick gags. So the 2 Frenchmen are played by beloved comics Louis de Funès and Bourvil. And before this movie, they had starred together in a smash called Le Cornio, which was the biggest comic success in France until then. The producer and the director, Gerard Horry, wanted to see if they could do that again. Of course, you can't really talk about things like deportation or collaboration, so they made this strictly a slapstick escape story. These 3 British pilots have to bail out over Paris. One lands in the Paris Zoo, the others end up in the Paris Opera. They were permitted, with a special dispensation from Minister of Culture André Malraux, to actually shoot in the opera. So those scenes are very lavish and interesting. And de Funès is the orchestra conductor. Bourvil plays a house painter. I have to say, almost any episode of the TV show Hogan's Heroes, I think, is cleverer and funnier. But for example, to give you a sense of the French sense of humor, there is a cross-eyed gentleman, a German, and every time he came on screen, there was a group of 3 or 4 women who were just beside themselves with laughter. The way he sees the world is, of course, double, and that leads to some very bad decisions.
Well, let's see if the humour gets lost in translation or not. Thank you very much, Lisa. Here's your chance to check out a slice of vintage French humour with a clip of La Grande Vadrouille. Remember to check out our website. You can also follow Encore on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.
For 2 and 240.
And you and me and you.
Reporters. For millions of Americans, the dream of getting a university degree has become a financial nightmare. Over the past few years, university fees have skyrocketed while salaries have stagnated. To go to college, you have either to be rich or willing to take on major debt. And all too often, the successful career the degree is meant to deliver takes forever to pan out. Hundreds of billions of dollars of student loan debt are weighing heavily on the country's economy. Don't miss our report into the vicious cycle of uncontrollable student loan debt.
Reporters, en France 24, and France24.com.